I didn't break my usual routine when I got back from work that Monday. I got in and was immediately greeted by my German Shepherd Max. I was, though, later than usual, as an accident en route had held me up somewhat. I could tell Max was getting hungry as he clawed at his bowl soon after I arrived. I filled it with a pungent mixture of lamb and vegetables as I got him to sit. His tongue licked his lips while he whimpered in anticipation as I placed his bowl on the floor and gestured him to eat. Once his snout was buried in his bowl, I made myself an omelet full of ham and mushrooms. After we had eaten, we sat and watched an episode of Police Interceptors while we waited for our food to digest. Once the episode had finished, I grabbed Max's leash and we headed out on our nightly walk. I walked the route on a daily basis, normally around an hour earlier though. We headed across the road and onto a woodland trail that would eventually take us back round to a main road that led us back home. I let Max off his leash and he began to zigzag, nose to ground ahead of me as usual. I had my flashlight with me so I wasn't too uneasy about the darkness the woodland shed on us. I also felt at ease with Max by my side. He was a big softy, especially with me, but also other people. But if he was threatened, I know that he would fiercely protect us both. We were around halfway through the wooded track when a distressing scream ripped through the distant trees ahead. I jumped, clutching the flashlight firmly while running it side to side through the upcoming foliage. Max was barking furiously while I tried to quiet him. I didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention to our presence. Max quietened down after I gave him some treats I had stashed in a pouch in my coat pocket. We then cautiously ventured further into the woods. I was telling myself it was probably just kids messing around, but I started to feel very uneasy, like every bone in my body wished for me to turn around. The sounds echoed around us again. This time 2 blood-curdling screams radiated towards me. They sounded louder, closer, and more manic. Max now seemed scared, his tail propped between his legs. I tried to reassure him as best I could as he stood behind me. A growl then came rasping through his gritted, snarling teeth. I shone my flashlight up and down the dense bushes 30 yards from where I stood, planted to the spot. The rustling leaves and the sound of twigs breaking under slow stalking movement was the only thing that my ears could hear. Suddenly appearing from within the bushes ahead of me, 3 sets of glowing amber eyes. Max suddenly bolted off behind me. I called out to him, but his running and barking droned off into the distance. I should have followed, but I just couldn't move, like all of my muscles had turned to stone. Every time I shone the light on the watching eyes, they would disappear instantly. They would soon reappear just as quickly, but from a different location from within the twisted branches. Shadowy figures then seemed to dance and distort within the thick overgrown shrubs, the few outreaching, leaf-covered twigs swaying up and down and side to side. Dried leaves began to crunch and rattle just before it all fell silent. My short quivering breath and pulsing veins around my ears were the only things I could hear as fear took over my body. In my state of terror, I made my first vital error. I looked back behind me, looking for some sort of escape. When I had looked towards the bushes once again, I was faced with 3 men, men in the loosest sense of the word. They were more like savage creatures, perched on all fours, half submerged from the thin branches and leaves that surrounded them. My light exposed their thick black hair that covered almost the entirety of their scrawny bodies, faces covered in blood, dirt, and tufts of hair. Their features were both human and inhuman at the same time, with thin pale lips gripping tightly around pointed, blood-stained teeth. Their eyes glowed bright amber, with piercing black oval pupils at the center. They were, for the moment, motionless. Their blotchy, bruised skin was emitting fine steam, as if my flashlight's illumination was burning into their flesh. I then made my second mistake. Almost instinctively, I turned and ran. I could hear the sound of their rapidly approaching, scurrying footsteps. The sound of pounding dirt and broken sticks grew louder as I only prayed I could keep my footing through the root-covered track. I glanced back as they once again stood motionless, all staring deep into my eyes. I stopped to gather my breath after realizing that they only ever moved once I had stopped looking at them. I backed away slowly, lifting my feet so I didn't trip in the process. I glanced behind me quickly as I saw the illuminating glow of streetlights, exposing the woodland exit. I shot my head forward as I heard their prowling movement, but again they all stood, unnervingly still. I continued to pace carefully backwards when my flashlight began to flicker. This couldn't be happening, I remember thinking, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my chest. Then, darkness, my only light source, had failed me. I then heard the roaring, harmonized screams from the 3 predators in front of me. I had 20 yards left between me and the end of this tree-shrouded hellhole. I threw my flashlight in anger and desperation at them and proceeded to sprint towards the lit road. The sound of fast crawling limbs and their erratic screams grew louder and louder. Just before I got to the edge of the exit, I felt a sharp pain in my lower right leg as a clawed hand grabbed my ankle. I fell. My head and torso was halfway onto the street-lit path. I turned and stared at them all. They were frozen solid, as I glanced down to see the lead creature's talons embedded into my leg. Blood then trickled and dripped onto the dirt below. My body and breath quivered in fear, as I was sure they were waiting for me to bleed out before dragging me back into the depths of the woodland. Just as my vision began to fade, I heard a snarling growl behind me. Max jumped over my struggling body and latched onto the creature's bony arm attached to me. I noticed that Max already had blood around his mouth, as if he had already just attacked something else. The creature's wide eyes were fixated on mine, as it opened its mouth unnaturally wide and let out a deafening cry. Its agonizing clasp on my leg suddenly released, as Max's head shook that thing's arm like a rag doll. I dragged myself backwards into the path shrouded in the orange glow of the streetlight above. Max let go of the creature, which was now laying motionless in the dirt. There were now 3 creatures hunched over stood behind it. Max growled and snarled as he guarded my attempt to stand. I then limped across the road towards my house. I glanced back into the wooded opening just as I caught 4 of the creatures disappear into the darkness. In that moment, I realized that Max hadn't bolted away and left me earlier. He had been chasing down another one of them terrifying creatures that was creeping up behind us. By the looks of it, he caught it just before coming back to my aid. I owe my life to my best friend Max. He really did save me that night. I got home and cleaned my wounds and called the police. I told them what I saw. I showed them my blood on the opening of the trail and what these creatures looked like. They sent a team in not long after to clear the woods, but they found nothing but a dripping trail of blood. It quickly dissipated into the foliage. I still see them from my window at night, their amber eyes appearing from deep into the woodland. I still don't know what them creatures were and why they only moved in the cover of darkness. All I know is that night will be the last time I ever enter them woods again. If you ever see, through the darkness, glowing amber eyes, do not turn and run, back away slowly, look straight at them, and I really hope you have a light source with you, as they seem to avoid it at all costs. Remember, never ever turn your back. That's when they'll get you.